She gained everything through a lie, but never expected her deceit to be recorded. Now, surrounded by betrayal and weighed down by her choices, her only way out is to face the truth, but the truth may cost her everything. Emily Carter, 32 years old, stood in the mirrored elevator of Horizon Analytics headquarters. She had an air of calculated precision, her shoulder-length chestnut brown hair neatly styled into soft waves that framed her angular face. Her hazel eyes, sharp and observant, betrayed an undercurrent of restlessness beneath her polished demeanor. Standing 5 feet 7 inches tall, with a lean, athletic build, Emily exuded confidence in her tailored navy blazer and pencil skirt, paired with a crisp white blouse. She was every bit the image of success she had meticulously constructed. As the elevator dinged to her floor, Emily clutched a sleek black leather portfolio in her manicured hands. She stepped into the bustling open office, where rows of desks hummed with quiet productivity. The muted tones of gray and white decor blended with the soft click of keyboards and distant murmurs of phone calls. Emily offered a professional nod to her colleagues as she made her way to her glass-walled office in the corner, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. Beneath her composed exterior, Emily's thoughts raced. She had built her career on ambition and relentless drive, climbing the corporate ladder faster than anyone else in her department. But the foundation of her success was not without cracks. Small adjustments to reports, slight omissions in presentations. Emily had convinced herself these were minor infractions, necessary to secure her rapid ascent. Today was no different. As she reviewed the quarterly financial report on her dual-screen monitor, her hazel eyes flickered with calculation. The numbers were promising but fell short of the aggressive targets set by the executive board. Her hand paused over the mouse, her lips pressing into a thin line. "This is just a small fix," she murmured to herself, her fingers typing rapidly as she adjusted projections. Her heartbeat quickened, but she dismissed the pang of guilt that surfaced. By noon, the report was submitted, its polished figures aligning perfectly with the company's goals. At 3 p.m., her manager, a pragmatic man in his late 40s named David Sinclair, summoned her to his office. "Emily," he said, his gray-blue eyes scrutinizing her, "this report is exceptional. As always, you've exceeded expectations." Emily smiled, a flicker of pride masking the anxiety bubbling beneath. "Thank you, David. Just doing my job." David leaned back in his chair. "Keep this up, and the executive board will take notice." As she left his office, Emily's steps were steady, but her mind was already racing ahead. Success was intoxicating, but the cost of her methods lingered like a shadow, waiting to catch up to her. Emily Carter adjusted her blazer as she returned to her glass-walled office, David Sinclair's words still echoing in her mind. The executive board will take notice. Sitting at her desk, she glanced at the photo of her parents on the corner of her desk, a reminder of the sacrifices they made to support her education and career. Her fingers brushed the frame briefly before returning to her keyboard. Success wasn't just a goal for Emily. It was an obligation. But this time, her ambition had come at a cost she hadn't anticipated. Across the floor, Marcus Reed, a diligent senior analyst in his early 30s, frowned at the financial report Emily had submitted earlier. Standing 6 feet 1 inch with broad shoulders, Marcus had sharp brown eyes that seemed to see through numbers like they were stories on a page. His short-cropped black hair and neatly pressed shirt gave him a professional air, but it was his unwavering commitment to accuracy that set him apart. As he cross-referenced the data, a discrepancy caught his attention. The projections were flawless, almost too flawless. Marcus leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. "Something doesn't add up," he muttered to himself. He double-checked the original data set against Emily's report. The differences were subtle but undeniable. Key figures had been inflated just enough to meet the board's expectations. Marcus's brows furrowed as he realized the implications. Meanwhile, Emily sat in her office, oblivious to Marcus's discovery. She was reviewing the agenda for an upcoming executive board meeting, where her report would be highlighted. But despite the praise from David, a gnawing unease crept into her thoughts. Her hazel eyes scanned the screen, lingering on the adjusted figures. "It's just numbers," she whispered, as if to reassure herself. "No one will notice. And even if they do, it's not like it's hurting anyone." Still, a tightness settled in her chest. That afternoon, Marcus approached Rebecca Warren, the head of the ethics committee. Rebecca, a composed woman in her late 40s with silver-streaked hair and piercing gray eyes, was known for her integrity and no-nonsense approach. She wore a dark green blazer that matched her meticulous demeanor. "Rebecca, do you have a minute?" Marcus asked, holding the report in his hands. "Of course," she replied, motioning for him to sit. Marcus laid the documents on her desk, explaining the discrepancies. "I don't want to jump to conclusions, but these adjustments weren't in the original data. They seem deliberate." Rebecca's eyes narrowed as she reviewed the evidence. "You're suggesting someone altered these figures?" Marcus hesitated before replying. "Yes, and based on the access logs, it points to Emily Carter." Rebecca leaned back, her sharp gaze unwavering. "This is a serious accusation, Marcus. If we proceed, it will have consequences. For her and for the company." "I understand," Marcus said firmly. "But if this goes unchecked, it could compromise our credibility." Rebecca nodded slowly, her expression grave. "I'll look into it, but tread carefully, this could get messy." Back in her office, Emily received an email from Rebecca, requesting a meeting the following morning. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened the message. "Emily, please be prepared to discuss the quarterly financial report in detail. There are some questions regarding the data projections." Emily's hands trembled slightly as she closed the email. The shadow of her actions was no longer distant. It was closing in. She stared at her reflection in the dark screen of her laptop, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. What if they find out? Emily Carter paced her sleek office, the email from Rebecca Warren still fresh in her mind. She adjusted the cuffs of her blazer, attempting to steady her nerves. The questions about the report could mean a routine check or the beginning of something far more dangerous. Her hazel eyes darted to the hallway outside her glass walls, where Marcus Reed walked by, a folder tucked under his arm. Emily's stomach churned. Though they had always maintained a cordial professional relationship, Marcus's meticulous nature made him an unlikely ally in her current situation. If anyone had spotted the discrepancies, it would be him. Marcus Reed sat in Rebecca Warren's office, his posture tense but resolute. He had brought additional documents, each highlighting subtle inconsistencies in Emily's past reports. These adjustments didn't just happen this quarter, Marcus began, sliding another report across Rebecca's desk. They've been happening for months. Though this is the first time the discrepancies are significant enough to raise suspicion. Rebecca's gray eyes scanned the papers carefully, her expression unreadable. "And you're confident that Emily Carter is behind these adjustments?" Marcus nodded. Her user credentials matched the timestamps on the edits. "It's clear she's been altering the data." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled thoughtfully. "This isn't just about ethics, Marcus. If what you're saying is true, Emily's actions could have far-reaching consequences for the company's reputation." As Emily left the office that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her heels clicked against the marble floors of the lobby, her polished image intact despite the storm brewing inside her mind. In the parking lot, Marcus's car was still there. She paused briefly, her chest tightening. "He's been unusually focused on me lately," she thought. Driving home, her thoughts spiraled. She had always seen Marcus as a perfectionist, someone who thrived on catching errors and solving puzzles. Now, he was the obstacle standing between her and the life she had meticulously built. Meanwhile, Rebecca Warren reviewed the evidence in her quiet office. The implications of Marcus's findings were clear. Emily Carter, a rising star in the company, had likely manipulated data to secure her promotion. Rebecca's loyalty was to the company's integrity, not to individual employees. Still, she knew how delicate the situation was. Emily's position as a senior leader made this more than a simple ethics review. It was a potential scandal. She drafted an email to Emily, requesting a meeting to discuss the quarterly report in detail. Rebecca's tone was neutral, But the purpose was clear. This was the first step in a larger investigation. The following morning, Emily sat across from Rebecca in the glass-walled conference room. Rebecca's piercing gaze made Emily feel as though every layer of her carefully constructed persona was being peeled away. "Emily," Rebecca began, her voice calm but firm, "we've noticed some inconsistencies in the quarterly report. Can you explain the adjustments made to the projections?" Emily's mind raced. She couldn't admit to the manipulation outright, not yet. "I adjusted the figures based on the latest market trends," she replied smoothly. It was a last-minute change to align with the board's expectations. Rebecca raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "I see. We'll need you to provide documentation to support those market trends. Can you have that ready by the end of the day?" Emily nodded, her stomach twisting into knots. Of course, as the meeting ended, Emily's composure remained intact, but she felt the walls closing in. In the shadows of the office, Marcus approached Rebecca again, a flash drive in hand. "This contains a recording of Emily editing the report," he said quietly. Rebecca took the drive, her expression hardening. "If this is what I think it is," Emily's actions just became indefensible. As Rebecca plugged the drive into her laptop, Marcus added, "She's already started spinning excuses. If we don't act quickly, she might try to cover her tracks." The recording began to play, and Rebecca's eyes narrowed as Emily's late-night adjustments came to life on the screen. "We'll handle this delicately," Rebecca said, but the look in her eyes told Marcus one thing. Emily Carter's carefully curated career was on the verge of collapse. Emily Carter returned to her office after the tense meeting with Rebecca Warren, her confidence shaken but not entirely broken. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, staring at the spotless room she had worked so hard to make her own. Everything about it symbolized her success. The glass walls, the view of the city skyline, but now it felt like a fragile facade. Sitting at her desk, Emily opened her laptop and began pulling together documents to support her fabricated explanation about market trends. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through data, searching for anything that could back up her claims. Meanwhile, Marcus Reed observed Emily from across the office floor. His sharp brown eyes followed her movements through the glass walls of her office. There was no satisfaction in his expression, only determination. "She's scrambling," he thought. Marcus had always admired Emily's sharp intellect and drive, but seeing her cross ethical boundaries had shifted his perspective. During his lunch break, Marcus met with Lisa, a junior analyst who had worked under Emily. Lisa was a petite woman in her late 20s with curly blonde hair and a reserved demeanor. She fidgeted nervously as Marcus questioned her about Emily's recent behavior. "I don't know much," Lisa admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I did notice she was working late a lot before the last report was submitted. She seemed stressed." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Thanks, Lisa. If you remember anything else, let me know." Back in the office, subtle whispers began to spread. Emily's colleagues noticed Rebecca's increased presence and the way Marcus seemed unusually focused on something or someone. "Do you think it's about the quarterly report?" one analyst murmured to another near the coffee station. "I don't know," the other replied. But Emily hasn't looked like herself lately. The rumors only fueled Emily's growing paranoia. She could feel the weight of every glance and hear the faintest murmurs as she walked through the office. Her carefully maintained image of control was beginning to crack. That evening, Emily sat alone in her apartment, the glow of her laptop reflecting off her anxious face. She had spent hours combing through data, but every attempt to justify her manipulations only led to dead ends. Her mind wandered to her parents, who had always been proud of her achievements. She pictured their faces if they knew the truth. "I didn't come this far to lose everything," she whispered to herself, her hazel eyes brimming with determination. Emily began drafting a plan to deflect attention from her actions. If she could shift the narrative, maybe she could salvage her career. In her office, Rebecca Warren reviewed the evidence Marcus had presented. The recording of Emily's late-night adjustments was damning, but Rebecca knew the importance of approaching the situation delicately. "We can't afford a scandal," she thought, her gray eyes narrowing as she considered the best course of action. Rebecca drafted a report to the board, outlining her findings and requesting permission to proceed with a formal investigation. Rebecca also sent a private email to Emily. Subject: follow-up request. Emily, I will need a finalized explanation of your adjustments by tomorrow. Let me know if you require additional resources. The message was polite but firm, and Emily knew there was no room for error. As Emily prepared to leave for the day, she noticed Marcus lingering near her office. His gaze met hers briefly, and she saw something unsettling in his expression, a mix of pity and resolve. Her stomach tightened as she stepped into the elevator. She couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was more involved in the investigation than she had realized. I need to figure out what he knows, she muttered to herself, gripping the strap of her leather bag. The elevator doors closed, leaving Emily alone with her growing unease. The next morning, Emily Carter arrived at the Horizon Analytics office earlier than usual. The air was crisp, and the faint glow of the sunrise reflected off the towering glass windows of the building. Emily's hazel eyes scanned the office floor as she stepped inside, noticing the unusual stillness. Her heart raced, knowing that today would bring new challenges. Sitting at her desk, Emily opened her email to find a message from Rebecca Warren. Subject: Ethics Committee Review Scheduled. Emily, the Ethics Committee has requested a meeting with you tomorrow morning to discuss the quarterly report. Please be prepared to provide full transparency regarding the adjustments made. The email was professional but carried an undertone of finality. Emily's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she debated her response. Across the building, Rebecca sat in her private office, reviewing the latest findings Marcus had provided. She leaned back in her chair, her silver-streaked hair catching the light as her sharp gray eyes scanned the report. It's only a matter of time, she thought. While Emily had submitted preliminary explanations, Rebecca sensed there was more to uncover. Before closing the file, Rebecca made a note to herself: check internal communication logs for additional discrepancies. Meanwhile, Marcus Reed sat at his desk, poring over archived reports. His sharp brown eyes narrowed as he noticed something unusual. The discrepancies in Emily's quarterly report were not isolated. Similar adjustments had appeared in older reports, predating Emily's promotion. This doesn't look like her work, he muttered under his breath. The style of manipulation was different, subtler, more systematic. Marcus printed the findings and brought them directly to Rebecca. There's more to this than Emily's adjustments, he said, placing the documents on her desk. Someone else has been manipulating data, and it looks like it goes higher up. Rebecca's expression darkened as she reviewed the evidence. If this is true, we're dealing with a much larger issue. As the day progressed, Emily felt the weight of the office atmosphere pressing down on her. Every glance from a colleague felt like a silent judgment. She caught Lisa and another analyst whispering near the coffee machine, their conversation halting abruptly when Emily approached. "Morning," Emily said curtly, her eyes narrowing as she passed them. The whispers had grown louder in her absence. She knew the rumors were spreading, and while she was desperate to defend herself, she couldn't risk drawing more attention to the situation. That evening, Emily sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her anxious face. She was combing through her old reports, searching for any detail she might have missed, any sign that someone else's actions could help divert the blame. Her hazel eyes landed on a report from 6 months earlier, one she hadn't touched. Yet, the figures showed the same pattern of manipulation. Emily's chest tightened as a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if someone else is using me as a shield? She immediately thought of Ethan Brooks, the charismatic CFO who had always seemed too polished to be trustworthy. Emily remembered his casual remarks during meetings, always steering discussions away from deeper financial reviews. "This isn't a coincidence," she whispered, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the data. Late that night, Marcus sent Rebecca a file marked urgent. It contained a single line of data pointing directly to Ethan Brooks's access logs. Rebecca's phone buzzed with the notification. She opened the file, her gray eyes narrowing as she read Marcus's note. The data manipulation predates Emily. Ethan might be involved. Rebecca's lips pressed into a thin line. "This changes everything," she muttered. At the same time, Emily's phone buzzed with a notification. It was an anonymous email containing a single sentence. "You're being watched. Stop digging." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The message was clear. Someone wanted her to back off, and she was now caught in something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. The next morning, Emily Carter walked into the office with a renewed sense of unease. Her hazel eyes darted toward Marcus Reed's desk, where he sat engrossed in his laptop. She couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. Her usual confident stride faltered slightly as she passed Lisa Harper, a junior analyst with a shy demeanor and curly blonde hair tied back in a loose bun. Lisa looked up briefly, her blue eyes meeting Emily's with hesitation before quickly glancing away. Emily paused by Lisa's desk. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying its usual professional tone. "Morning," Lisa replied, her tone guarded. "Is everything all right?" Emily pressed, sensing Lisa's discomfort. Lisa hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with a pen. "Yeah, everything's fine," she said quickly, but her voice betrayed her unease. Emily offered a tight smile before moving on, but the encounter left her unsettled. "They're all talking about me," she thought. Later that afternoon, Emily approached Marcus in the break room. He was leaning against the counter, stirring sugar into his coffee. His sharp brown eyes focused on the swirling liquid as though deep in thought. "Marcus," Emily began, forcing a neutral tone, "can we talk?" Marcus glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Emily folded her arms, her stance defensive. "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time with Rebecca lately. Is there something I should know?" Marcus's gaze didn't waver. "Rebecca's doing her job, Emily. And so am I." His calm response only fueled Emily's frustration. "If there's an issue with my work, I'd prefer to hear it directly." Marcus set his coffee down and met her eyes. "You'll know soon enough," he said evenly, his tone neither threatening nor reassuring. Lisa sat at her desk, her thoughts racing. She had overheard parts of Marcus and Rebecca's discussions, enough to piece together that Emily was under investigation. While Lisa respected Emily for her leadership, she couldn't ignore the growing evidence against her. As Lisa stared at her screen, an internal chat notification popped up. It was from Marcus. "Do you have a moment? Need your input on a report." Lisa hesitated, knowing that agreeing to help Marcus might further implicate Emily. But after a deep breath, she replied, "Sure, I'll stop by." Later that day, Emily was called into Rebecca Warren's office. The head of the ethics committee was as composed as ever, her sharp gray eyes betraying no emotion as she gestured for Emily to sit. "Emily," Rebecca began, her voice calm but firm, "I wanted to give you a heads up about tomorrow's committee review. We'll be asking for clarification on a few additional points." Emily's stomach churned. "I'll have everything prepared," she replied, her voice steady despite the anxiety bubbling inside her. Rebecca's gaze lingered on Emily for a moment longer. "I hope so," she said. "This is your opportunity to provide full transparency. Use it wisely." The words hung in the air like a subtle warning. As Emily returned to her desk, her phone buzzed with a new email. It was from Ethan Brooks, the CFO whose name had recently surfaced in Marcus's findings. Subject: "Let's talk. Emily, I've heard about some of the questions being raised regarding the quarterly report. If you need guidance on how to handle the committee, let me know. I'd hate for this to escalate unnecessarily." Emily's hands trembled as she read the message. While the email appeared supportive on the surface, she couldn't ignore the underlying threat. Ethan was watching her closely, and his intentions were far from benign. Is he trying to help or manipulate me further? She wondered. Emily Carter sat at her desk, staring at the email from Ethan Brooks. The words blurred as her thoughts spiraled. Ethan's message was laced with ambiguity, offering help while hinting at potential consequences if she didn't tread carefully. Why now? She wondered. Ethan had always maintained a polished and charismatic exterior, but something about his sudden interest felt calculated. She closed the email without responding, deciding it was safer to keep her distance. But the growing weight of suspicion wasn't something she could ignore. The next morning, Emily was summoned to Rebecca Warren's office again. The head of the ethics committee had added more documents to the growing pile on her desk, each marked with sticky notes and highlighted discrepancies. "Emily," Rebecca began, her tone measured but direct, "there are additional inconsistencies in past reports that require explanation. These adjustments predate your promotion, but your name appears in the access logs. Can you clarify this?" Emily's mind raced. She hadn't altered those reports. She was certain of it. Yet Rebecca's pointed question left no room for doubt that Emily was being implicated in something far larger than she anticipated. "I'll need to review those records," Emily replied carefully. "I don't recall making those changes, but I'll double-check my files." Rebecca's sharp gray eyes didn't waver. "Please do. The committee review this afternoon will cover these findings as well." Meanwhile, Marcus Reed dug deeper into the access logs, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he cross-referenced data from the past year. His earlier suspicions about Ethan Brooks were solidifying. A particular entry caught his attention: a series of changes made late at night, logged under Emily's credentials. But the timestamps didn't match her typical work hours. "That doesn't make sense," Marcus muttered, leaning closer to the screen. He traced the IP address associated with the edits and froze. The changes had been made from a remote location, one that wasn't linked to Emily's office or home. This wasn't her, he realized, his heart pounding. Someone had been using Emily's credentials to cover their tracks. As the clock ticked closer to the committee review, Emily's nerves frayed further. Every glance from a colleague felt like a judgment. Every whisper a confirmation of her worst fears. In the break room, she overheard two analysts talking in hushed tones. "Do you think she'll survive the review?" one asked. "I don't know," the other replied. "But it's not looking good." Emily's chest tightened as she left the room without a word. Her carefully built reputation was unraveling, and she could feel it slipping further out of her control. Minutes before the ethics committee review, Emily received another email from Ethan Brooks. Subject: "Last chance. Emily, if you want to avoid a public fallout, meet me in the conference room before the review. I can help smooth this over, but you need to trust me." Emily's hands trembled as she read the message. Ethan was offering an olive branch, but at what cost? Meeting him could mean aligning herself with someone who might be pulling the strings behind her unraveling, or it could be her only chance to salvage her career. Taking a deep breath, Emily grabbed her laptop and headed for the elevator. Her next decision could determine everything. Emily Carter stood outside the conference room, her hand hovering over the door handle. Ethan Brooks's email replayed in her mind like a warning. "I can help smooth this over, but you need to trust me." Her instincts screamed that this was a trap, yet the alternative, facing the ethics committee without any leverage, felt equally dangerous. Emily's hazel eyes darted down the hallway, catching a glimpse of Marcus Reed exiting Rebecca's office. Their eyes met briefly, and Marcus's expression was a mix of suspicion and pity. Taking a deep breath, Emily opened the door. Inside the room, Ethan Brooks waited, his sharp suit and confident posture exuding authority. The CFO stood by the window, the morning sunlight casting long shadows across his face. His blue-gray eyes locked onto Emily as she entered. "Emily," he said, his tone calm but edged with control, "thank you for coming. I know this situation has been stressful for you." Emily didn't sit. Her posture was defensive, her hands gripping the back of a chair. "Why am I here, Ethan?" Ethan gestured for her to sit, but when she didn't move, he smirked. Straight to the point. "I like that." Leaning against the table, he continued, "I know Rebecca and Marcus have been digging into the reports. What they don't realize is that their so-called investigation could expose more than just your actions. It could damage the company, and everyone in it." Emily's pulse quickened as Ethan spoke. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked cautiously. Ethan straightened, his gaze piercing. "I can make this all go away. I have influence with the board, and I can ensure the investigation doesn't go any further. But I'll need your cooperation." Emily narrowed her eyes. "What kind of cooperation?" Ethan smirked again. "You admit to a smaller infraction, something plausible but forgivable. In exchange, I'll redirect the investigation elsewhere. Everyone walks away intact. Emily's stomach churned. She knew accepting Ethan's deal would mean sacrificing any hope of clearing her name completely. But rejecting it could mean exposing herself to the full consequences of her actions, and whatever else Ethan might be hiding. As the clock struck noon, Emily entered the ethics committee meeting. Rebecca Warren sat at the head of the table, her composed demeanor masking the tension in the room. Marcus was there along with 2 senior board members. The walls felt like they were closing in as Rebecca began. Emily, thank you for joining us. We've reviewed the quarterly report, as well as previous reports linked to your access credentials. We'd like to hear your explanation regarding the discrepancies. Emily's voice wavered slightly as she began. I adjusted the projections based on market trends. It was a last-minute decision, and I should have documented it better. That was my mistake. Rebecca raised an eyebrow, her gray eyes narrowing. And the adjustments made to reports from 6 months ago, were those also market-driven? Emily froze. She hadn't anticipated this line of questioning. I'd need to review those reports again. I don't recall making changes that far back. Rebecca exchanged a glance with Marcus, who slid a document across the table. These changes were made under your credentials, he said. But the access logs show they were edited remotely, outside of office hours. Before Emily could respond, the door to the conference room opened, and Ethan walked in unannounced. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said smoothly, his confident smile disarming the room. Rebecca's expression darkened. Mr. Brooks, this is a private committee review. Ethan ignored her, turning his attention to Emily. I thought it might be helpful to offer some context, he said, holding up a folder. Emily's breath caught as he placed the folder on the table. These are the original financial projections, Ethan said. They show adjustments made well before Emily took on her current role. If you're looking for answers, you won't find them with her. Rebecca's sharp gaze darted between Ethan and the folder. And where did you obtain these? Ethan's smile widened. Let's just say I have a vested interest in protecting this company. As the room fell into uneasy silence, Emily's heart sank. Ethan wasn't helping her. He was positioning himself as the savior while steering the investigation in a direction that suited his own agenda. What have I gotten myself into? She thought, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. Emily Carter left the ethics committee meeting feeling cornered and manipulated. Ethan Brooks's sudden intervention had shifted the narrative, but not in her favor. While his actions temporarily cast doubt on her involvement, they also made it clear that Ethan was orchestrating a larger game, and she was just another piece on his board. As she stepped into the hallway, her hazel eyes darted toward Marcus Reed, who stood at a nearby window, reviewing his notes. Marcus's sharp brown eyes met hers briefly, and Emily felt a surge of determination. She needed to take control of the situation before Ethan buried her entirely. That evening, Emily sat in her dimly lit apartment, the glow of her laptop reflecting off her face. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened a private browser and began searching for any information about Ethan Brooks that could connect him to the manipulated reports. Her instincts told her that Ethan's confidence during the meeting wasn't just arrogance. It was a calculated move to cover his tracks. If she could find evidence of his involvement, she might be able to shift the blame off herself and expose the larger truth. Hours passed as Emily combed through financial filings, press releases, and internal memos she had saved over the years. Finally, she found something. An email exchange between Ethan and a third-party vendor, dated 6 months before her promotion. The language was vague, but it hinted at discrepancies in reported revenue. A potential link to the manipulated reports Marcus had discovered. This has to mean something, Emily muttered, saving the files to a secure drive. The next morning, Emily approached Marcus's desk, her hands clutching a printout of the email exchange. Marcus, she said, her voice low and steady, I need to talk to you. Marcus looked up, his expression cautious. What is it, Emily? Emily hesitated, knowing that trusting him was a risk. I found something that implicates Ethan. These reports, he's been manipulating data long before I was promoted. You need to see this. Marcus raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Why are you showing me this now? Because he's using me as a shield, Emily replied firmly. And if you don't believe me, take a closer look at the remote access logs. They don't match my location or work hours. Marcus studied her for a moment before nodding. Fine. Show me what you have. In a quiet conference room, Emily laid out her findings. Marcus reviewed the documents, his sharp eyes narrowing as he connected the dots. This could be enough to open a deeper investigation into Ethan, Marcus said, his tone measured. But you're not off the hook, Emily. You still made those adjustments to the quarterly report. I know, Emily admitted, her voice tinged with regret. I'm not trying to excuse what I did. I just want the truth to come out. About all of it, Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering her words. If we do this, you'll need to come clean about everything. No more half-truths. Emily nodded. I understand. Later that day, Marcus presented the new findings to Rebecca Warren. Emily stood beside him, her palms sweating as Rebecca reviewed the documents. These emails are troubling, Rebecca said, her sharp gray eyes flicking between the pages. If Ethan has been orchestrating this, we'll need to escalate the investigation to the board immediately. Rebecca's gaze shifted to Emily. But you're still accountable for your role in this, Emily. Are you prepared to admit to your actions publicly? Emily swallowed hard. Yes, I'm ready. Rebecca nodded, her expression softening slightly. Then let's proceed. This won't be easy, but it's the right thing to do. That evening, as Emily prepared to leave the office, her phone buzzed with a new email. Subject: Last warning. Emily, I know what you're trying to do. If you proceed, I'll make sure everyone knows every mistake you've ever made. Think carefully before your next move. The sender was anonymous, but Emily knew it was Ethan. Her hands trembled as she locked her phone, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. I can't back down now, she thought. Not when I'm so close to exposing him. The morning after Ethan's veiled threat, Emily Carter arrived at Horizon Analytics to find an unexpected commotion in the office. Colleagues huddled in small groups, whispering and glancing toward Rebecca Warren's office. The tension in the air was palpable, and Emily's chest tightened as she made her way to her desk. Her inbox was flooded with emails, but one subject line stood out. Internal audit announcement. All hands meeting at 10 a.m. Emily froze. An internal audit meant every aspect of the company's operations would come under scrutiny. If Rebecca and Marcus's findings weren't enough to expose Ethan, this audit might uncover more than anyone had bargained for, including Emily's own mistakes. At precisely 10 a.m., Rebecca stood at the front of the packed conference room, her composed demeanor masking the gravity of the situation. As many of you are aware, she began, her voice steady. Questions have been raised about discrepancies in recent financial reports. To maintain transparency and uphold the integrity of Horizon Analytics, the board has authorized an internal audit effective immediately. The room buzzed with murmurs. Ethan Brooks sat near the back, his arms crossed and a faint smirk on his face. Emily, seated near Marcus, felt her pulse quicken as Rebecca continued. This audit will be comprehensive, Rebecca said. No department or individual will be exempt from review. Back at her desk, Emily's thoughts raced. The audit would undoubtedly reveal her role in manipulating the quarterly report, even if her actions paled in comparison to Ethan's. But more troubling was the possibility that Ethan might use the audit to shift the focus entirely onto her. As she opened her laptop, a new email from Marcus appeared in her inbox. Emily, we need to meet. I've uncovered something you need to see. Emily's heart sank. She grabbed her notebook and hurried to Marcus's desk, her mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. In a quiet corner of the office, Marcus laid out his latest findings. I went through the access logs again, he said, his tone grave. Not only do they show activity from a remote location, but the timestamps overlap with entries from Ethan's account. He was accessing the same reports at the same time, likely using your credentials to cover his tracks. Emily leaned over the table, her hazel eyes scanning the logs. This proves he's been framing me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded. It's a start. But there's something else. Ethan's been communicating with an external firm, one that specializes in asset concealment. He's not just manipulating reports. He's hiding money. Emily's stomach churned. The scale of Ethan's deceit was far greater than she had imagined. As Emily and Marcus discussed their next steps, a company-wide email from Ethan Brooks landed in everyone's inbox. To the Horizon Analytics team, I want to address the ongoing discussions regarding recent financial discrepancies. Transparency has always been a cornerstone of this company, and I welcome the internal audit as an opportunity to clear the air. Let's work together to protect the integrity of our organization. The email was calculated, painting Ethan as a champion of honesty while subtly casting doubt on anyone who might accuse him. Emily clenched her fists, her frustration mounting. He's trying to get ahead of this, Marcus said. If the audit doesn't move quickly, he could manipulate the narrative even further. As the day wore on, Emily found herself at a crossroads. She could continue working with Marcus and Rebecca, hoping their evidence would be enough to bring Ethan down, or she could take a riskier path. Emily glanced at her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found the number of a journalist she'd once met at a corporate event. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Going public could backfire, she thought. But if the audit gets delayed or Ethan finds a way to twist the truth, it might be the only way to expose him. She set the phone down, her mind racing with the weight of her decision. As Emily sat deep in thought, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I know what Ethan's hiding. If you want the truth, meet me tonight. Cafe Verona, 8 p.m. Emily's breath caught. She typed back quickly. Who is this? The reply came almost instantly. Someone who wants justice as much as you do. Emily stared at the screen, torn between suspicion and hope. Whoever this person was, they might hold the key to unraveling Ethan's scheme, or they could be setting her up for a trap. Emily Carter arrived at Cafe Verona just before 8 p.m., her nerves taut. The dimly lit cafe was nearly empty, its warm tones and soft music doing little to ease the tension in her chest. She scanned the room, searching for the mysterious contact. Near the back, a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a weathered face raised a hand. He wore a simple gray blazer, his posture calm but watchful. Emily hesitated before approaching. Emily Carter, he asked, his voice low but firm. That's me, she replied, sliding into the seat across from him. Who are you? The man leaned forward. Name's Sam Hargrove. I used to work in Horizon's finance division before Ethan Brooks made sure I didn't. Over the next hour, Sam revealed startling details about Ethan's activities. He's been cooking the books for years, Sam began, his gray eyes scanning the cafe to ensure they weren't overheard. But it's not just financial manipulation. Ethan's been funneling company money into offshore accounts, using shell companies to hide the trail. Emily's breath caught. And you have proof of this? Sam nodded, sliding a flash drive across the table. Every report, every transaction, every email I could salvage before he forced me out. It's all here. Emily's hands shook as she picked up the drive. Why are you giving this to me? Sam's gaze hardened. Because Ethan ruined my career, and I'm tired of watching him get away with it. But you need to be careful. He'll do whatever it takes to protect himself. Emily returned home, her mind racing. The information on the flash drive was explosive, enough to not only clear her name, but also expose Ethan's entire scheme. But she knew she couldn't act alone. The next morning, Emily met with Marcus in a secluded conference room at Horizon. She explained everything Sam had told her and handed him the flash drive. Marcus plugged it into his laptop, his sharp brown eyes widening as he reviewed the files. This is huge, he said. If we can get this to Rebecca, it'll seal the case against Ethan. Emily nodded. But we need to move quickly. Ethan's already positioning himself as the hero of this audit. If he catches wind of this, he'll bury us. As Emily and Marcus planned their next steps, Ethan Brooks was already putting his countermeasures into motion. He had intercepted rumors about Sam Hargrove's involvement and decided to act preemptively. That afternoon, an email from Ethan landed in Rebecca Warren's inbox. Rebecca, I've received concerning information that Emily Carter has been colluding with a disgruntled former employee to discredit the company. I'd like to discuss this matter urgently to ensure we maintain control of the narrative." Rebecca's eyes narrowed as she read the message. She knew Ethan well enough to sense when he was trying to manipulate a situation. The following day, Rebecca called an emergency meeting with the ethics committee. Emily and Marcus sat across from Ethan, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. Ethan spoke first, his voice calm but laced with accusation. "I've recently been made aware that Ms. Carter has been engaging with former employees who hold a grudge against this company. This behavior undermines the integrity of the audit and creates unnecessary distractions." Emily's chest tightened, but Marcus interjected before she could respond. Actually, Marcus began, sliding a printed document across the table. "This disgruntled former employee provided evidence that directly implicates you, Ethan." The room fell silent as Rebecca reviewed the document. A detailed report of Ethan's offshore transactions. Her sharp gray eyes locked onto Ethan, her expression unreadable. Ethan's smirk faltered for the first time. "This is absurd," he said, his voice rising. "These documents could have been fabricated by anyone. You're taking the word of a fired employee over a trusted executive." Rebecca's tone was cold. "If these allegations are true, Ethan, you've done far more damage to this company than anyone else sitting at this table." As the meeting ended, Emily felt a flicker of hope. But her relief was short-lived. That evening, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're playing a dangerous game, Emily. You don't know who you're up against." Emily's fingers tightened around her phone. She glanced out the window, her reflection staring back at her in the dark glass. Who else is involved in this? She thought, realizing that Ethan might not be acting alone, and the stakes were higher than she'd imagined. Emily Carter sat at her desk in the dimly lit office, her mind churning with possibilities. The text message from the unknown sender had rattled her. Someone else was involved, and they were watching her every move. Her hazel eyes shifted to the USB drive Sam Hargrove had given her. On it were the keys to exposing Ethan Brooks, but also the risk of uncovering just how deeply entangled she had become in the company's web of deceit. She glanced toward Marcus Reed's desk across the office floor. His sharp focus on his laptop reassured her, but for how long could they both stay ahead of Ethan? Rebecca Warren, the head of the ethics committee, was taking no chances. After the emergency meeting, she ordered a full forensic audit of Ethan's financial activities. Sitting in her corner office, Rebecca's piercing gray eyes scanned the documents Marcus had provided, her sharp mind piecing together the bigger picture. She called Emily to her office. "I need you to stay alert," Rebecca said, her tone unusually direct. "If Ethan senses that we're closing in, he'll act. And based on his history, I don't think he'll play fair." Emily nodded, but her chest tightened. "Do you think he'll try to sabotage the audit?" Rebecca's lips pressed into a thin line. "I think he'll do whatever it takes to save himself." Later that day, Emily noticed subtle but disturbing changes in the office. Security cameras in the hallways were suddenly pointed at different angles, and IT personnel were making rounds, checking employees' computers without explanation. "Ethan's trying to tighten his grip," Marcus muttered when Emily pointed it out. "He's probably monitoring everyone to find out who's working against him." Emily's stomach churned. Every email she sent and every file she accessed felt like a risk. She and Marcus began using encrypted channels to communicate, knowing that their moves were being scrutinized. That evening, as Emily sat in her apartment reviewing the forensic audit's progress, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name she hadn't seen in years. Sarah Bennett, an investigative journalist she'd met at a corporate event. "Emily," Sarah began, her voice calm but urgent. "I've been hearing whispers about Horizon Analytics. Something about financial misconduct tied to Ethan Brooks. Can you confirm?" Emily's breath caught. "Where did you hear that?" "I have my sources," Sarah replied. "But if you're involved, I want to give you a chance to tell your side of the story. Off the record, for now." Emily hesitated. Going public could expose Ethan, but it would also put a spotlight on her own actions. "I'll think about it," she said finally, ending the call. The next morning, Emily arrived at her desk to find an envelope waiting for her. Inside was a printed photo of her standing outside Cafe Verona with Sam Hargrove, along with a typed note. "You're in over your head. Drop this or you'll regret it." Her hands shook as she looked around the office, trying to spot anyone who might be watching her reaction. Ethan was playing a dangerous game, but the note only strengthened her resolve. Just as Emily was about to confide in Marcus, her phone buzzed with another message from the anonymous number. "I have evidence that will bring Ethan down for good. Meet me at the East Side parking garage, level 3, tonight at 9. Emily's heart raced. Could this be a genuine lead or another of Ethan's traps? She stared at the message, weighing the risks. Finally, she typed back, "I'll be there." The East Side parking garage was eerily quiet that evening, the hum of distant traffic echoing faintly through the concrete structure. Emily Carter arrived a few minutes before 9 p.m., her heart pounding as she parked her car on level 3. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the empty lot. She stepped out of her car, her hazel eyes scanning the surroundings. A sense of unease settled in her chest. What if this is a trap? She thought, clutching her bag tightly. A figure emerged from the shadows, a middle-aged woman in a long gray coat and thick-rimmed glasses. Her dark hair was tied back, and she carried a leather briefcase that looked worn but sturdy. "Emily Carter?" the woman asked, her voice low but steady. "That's me," Emily replied cautiously. "Who are you?" The woman extended a hand. "Claire Jennings. I work for the Financial Audit Division at Horizon." Emily's breath caught. "Why are you here? What evidence do you have?" Claire opened her briefcase, pulling out a thick stack of documents. "Ethan Brooks has been running an elaborate embezzlement scheme for years," she began, her tone clipped. "These are copies of wire transfers, offshore account details, and internal memos tying him directly to the discrepancies in the reports." Emily quickly scanned the top document, her pulse quickening. "This is incredible. Why haven't you brought this to Rebecca or the board?" Claire's expression darkened. "I tried, but every time I submitted something, it disappeared. Ethan has people inside IT covering for him. That's why I reached out to you. I need someone outside the system to expose this." Emily nodded, her mind racing. "If we combine this with the files from Sam Hargrove, it'll be enough to take him down." Claire hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "Be careful, Emily. Ethan won't go down quietly. He's already watching you." As Claire handed over the documents, the sound of screeching tires echoed through the garage. Both women froze as a black SUV sped onto the level, its headlights glaring. "Run!" Claire shouted, grabbing Emily's arm. They darted between parked cars as the SUV accelerated toward them. Emily's heart raced as adrenaline surged through her veins. She clutched the stack of documents tightly, knowing that losing them would mean losing everything. Claire led them toward a stairwell, pushing Emily ahead. "Go! I'll distract them." "No!" Emily protested, but Claire shoved her forward. The SUV skidded to a stop, and two men in dark suits emerged, chasing after Claire. Panting heavily, Emily sprinted up the stairs, clutching the railing for support. She burst onto the street level, her eyes darting wildly for help. Spotting a taxi idling at a nearby curb, she ran toward it, throwing herself into the back seat. "Drive! Just go!" she shouted, slamming the door behind her. The driver hesitated, his eyes widening in confusion. "What's going on?" "Please," Emily pleaded, her voice trembling. The driver finally complied, pulling away from the curb just as the men in suits emerged from the stairwell. Emily looked back through the rear window, her chest heaving. Claire was nowhere to be seen. When Emily arrived at her apartment, she immediately locked the door and drew the curtains. Her hands shook as she spread the documents across her coffee table. The evidence was damning, everything Rebecca and Marcus needed to end Ethan's reign of manipulation. But her relief was short-lived. Her phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "Your friend didn't make it. You're next." Emily's blood ran cold. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. What happened to Claire? And how far will Ethan go to silence me? The following morning, Emily Carter arrived at Horizon Analytics with a renewed sense of purpose. Her hazel eyes burned with determination as she clutched the briefcase containing Claire's damning documents. The ominous message from the previous night still echoed in her mind, but it fueled her resolve rather than her fear. As she stepped onto the bustling office floor, Emily caught sight of Marcus Reed. His sharp brown eyes lit up with curiosity as she motioned for him to follow her into the privacy of a nearby conference room. Inside, Emily spread the documents across the table. "This is everything Claire Jennings gave me," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "It ties Ethan directly to offshore accounts, embezzlement, and data manipulation." Marcus leaned over the table, scanning the evidence. "This is enough to bury him," he said, his voice tinged with both awe and urgency. "But we need to act fast," Emily continued. "Whoever sent that SUV after us last night knows what we have. They'll try to stop us before we can expose him." Marcus nodded. "Rebecca needs to see this immediately. Let's go." Rebecca Warren's gray eyes widened slightly as Emily and Marcus laid the evidence before her. "This is damning," she said, flipping through the stack of documents. Her normally composed demeanor faltered as she realized the gravity of what she held. Emily spoke quickly, her words laced with urgency. "Ethan won't hesitate to destroy anyone who gets in his way. Last night, Claire Jennings was taken, possibly worse. He'll come for us next if we don't act now." Rebecca's expression hardened. "We'll escalate this to the board immediately. But we need to secure this evidence. Make sure it's untouchable." Marcus nodded. "I'll make copies and send them to trusted board members. We can't let Ethan get ahead of this." As Rebecca worked to convene an emergency board meeting, Emily and Marcus returned to the main office floor. The tension was palpable. Whispers circulated, and suspicious glances followed Emily wherever she went. Halfway through the day, an email from Ethan Brooks landed in everyone's inbox. "Team, I'm aware of recent rumors circulating regarding our financial practices. I assure you, these are baseless accusations from disgruntled individuals trying to discredit Horizon Analytics. The board has my full cooperation as we address this matter internally. Let's stay focused on our work and not let these distractions derail us." Emily's stomach churned as she read the email. Ethan was trying to control the narrative, painting himself as the victim while casting doubt on those working against him. At lunchtime, Marcus approached Emily with a grim expression. "The files I sent to the board, they were intercepted. Someone in IT flagged them as a breach, and now they're locked down." Emily's chest tightened. Ethan's tightening his grip. "If we can't get this to the board, we're done." Marcus hesitated before replying. "There's one option left. We need to confront Ethan directly, on record." Emily's breath caught. "You mean, corner him in a meeting?" Marcus nodded. "If we present this evidence in front of Rebecca and key board members, he won't be able to talk his way out of it." That afternoon, Rebecca arranged a meeting with Ethan under the guise of discussing the ongoing audit. She invited Emily and Marcus to join as witnesses. As Ethan entered the conference room, his usual confident demeanor was intact, but his blue-gray eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Rebecca," he said smoothly, taking a seat, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Rebecca's expression was cold. "We need to discuss the findings from the audit." Marcus placed the stack of documents on the table, sliding them toward Ethan. "Care to explain these, Ethan?" Ethan's smirk faded as he flipped through the pages. "This is nonsense," he scoffed. "Anyone could have fabricated these." But Emily leaned forward, her voice sharp. "The timestamps, the accounts, the emails, all of it points back to you. And we have more where this came from." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his calm facade cracking. "You're making a grave mistake," he said, his voice low and threatening. "If you think you can bring me down without taking yourselves down with me, you're delusional." Rebecca's voice was icy. "Ethan, this evidence is enough to launch a full-scale investigation. You can either cooperate or face the consequences." Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You'll regret this," he snarled before storming out of the room. As the door slammed behind him, Emily exhaled shakily. But her relief was short-lived. Her phone buzzed with a new message. "This isn't over, Emily. Watch your back." The tension in the office was suffocating as the full weight of the evidence began to shift the tides. Ethan Brooks had left the building in a fury, but Emily Carter knew his threats were not idle. Every step she took, every glance from her colleagues, felt like a warning. Yet she pressed on. The truth was out there now, and there was no turning back. Rebecca Warren had convened an emergency board meeting that afternoon. Marcus Reed and Emily stood outside the boardroom, the stack of evidence in hand, waiting for their chance to present the truth. Inside the boardroom, Ethan sat among the members, his expression cool but his mind racing. He knew the evidence against him was damning, but he wasn't going to go down without a fight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan began, his voice calm and measured. "It's clear to me that these accusations are part of a coordinated smear campaign. This so-called evidence was brought forward by disgruntled former employees and individuals with questionable motives." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting that the forensic audit results are fabricated, Ethan? Because they paint a very different picture." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm saying that jumping to conclusions based on incomplete data is reckless." Rebecca gestured for Emily and Marcus to enter the room. As they stepped inside, the board members turned their attention to the pair, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Emily cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the nervous energy coursing through her. "Good afternoon. I know my role in this investigation has raised questions, and I want to be completely transparent about my involvement." She placed the documents on the table, her hazel eyes meeting those of the board members. "This evidence, combined with findings from a forensic audit, shows a pattern of financial manipulation that directly implicates Ethan Brooks. These actions go back years, well before my time in this position." Marcus added, "We've cross-referenced these findings with internal logs, offshore accounts, and email communications. The evidence is irrefutable." The board members reviewed the documents in silence, their expressions growing graver with each page. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his calm demeanor slipping into barely concealed anger. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "You're taking the word of an employee under investigation and a junior analyst over me? I've built this company's reputation." Rebecca's voice was cold and precise. "And now you've jeopardized that reputation. The evidence speaks for itself, Ethan. You've misused company funds, manipulated data, and endangered the integrity of Horizon Analytics." Ethan stood abruptly. "You're making a mistake. This company needs me." A senior board member, a stern woman with silver hair, spoke up. "No, Ethan. What this company needs is integrity, and you've proven you can't provide it." The board voted unanimously to remove Ethan Brooks from his position and launch a formal investigation into his activities. Security escorted him from the building, his protests echoing down the hallways. Emily watched as Ethan disappeared through the front doors, a mixture of relief and exhaustion washing over her. But the battle wasn't over yet. She still had to account for her own actions. The next morning, Emily stood before the ethics committee. Rebecca, Marcus, and several board members were present, their expressions serious but not hostile. "I won't deny that I manipulated the quarterly report," Emily began, her voice steady. "I made a mistake, one that I deeply regret. But I'm here to take full responsibility for my actions and to help this company rebuild its integrity." Rebecca leaned forward. "And how do you propose we do that, Emily?" Emily hesitated for only a moment before replying. "By creating a transparency initiative, a system that ensures all financial activities are audited regularly and independently. I've already started drafting a proposal." The board members exchanged glances, their expressions softening. Weeks later, Horizon Analytics announced the launch of the Integrity Initiative, spearheaded by Emily Carter and overseen by Rebecca Warren. The program quickly became a model for corporate ethics, restoring the company's reputation and preventing future misconduct. Emily, though no longer in her former role, found purpose in her work. The mistakes she had made became lessons, and the challenges she faced strengthened her resolve to build something better. One evening, Emily sat in her apartment, the glow of her laptop reflecting off her face. A news article about Horizon's Integrity Initiative filled the screen. Her name featured prominently. She smiled faintly, her hazel eyes shining with a mix of relief and hope. She had faced her demons, made amends, and emerged stronger. The buzzing of her phone broke her reverie. A message from Marcus read, "We did it. Time to celebrate." Emily replied with a simple, "Absolutely." As she set the phone down, she realized that while her journey had been fraught with mistakes, it had also led her to a new purpose and a chance to help others avoid the same pitfalls. Months had passed since Ethan Brooks's dramatic fall, but the echoes of his actions continued to ripple through Horizon Analytics. The company's leadership worked tirelessly to rebuild trust with its clients and employees. The Integrity Initiative, Emily Carter's brainchild, became the cornerstone of this transformation. Under Rebecca Warren's guidance, the program implemented rigorous checks and balances, ensuring complete transparency in all financial dealings. The culture of secrecy and shortcuts that had plagued the company was slowly replaced by one of accountability and trust. For Emily, the aftermath of the scandal was both challenging and rewarding. Though she had stepped down from her position at Horizon Analytics, she was far from defeated. She had turned her focus to consulting, using her experience to help other organizations establish ethical practices. Her work took her to conferences and workshops, where she shared her story openly. "Mistakes don't define you," she told one audience. "What defines you is how you respond to them. Owning up to your actions is the first step toward rebuilding your life and your integrity." Her candor resonated with many, and Emily found a new sense of purpose in helping others navigate the same moral dilemmas she had faced. Marcus Reed remained at Horizon Analytics, taking on a leadership role within the Integrity Initiative. His diligence and unwavering commitment to doing what was right had earned him the respect of his peers and the board. He and Emily stayed in touch, often discussing their shared efforts to foster ethical practices. One evening, over coffee, Marcus told her, "You turned a disaster into a turning point, Emily. Most people wouldn't have had the courage to do that." Emily smiled, her hazel eyes filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Marcus. You believed in the truth and in me even when I didn't." Rebecca Warren's leadership during the crisis cemented her reputation as a stalwart of corporate integrity. Though she remained composed throughout the ordeal, those closest to her knew how deeply she had invested in the company's recovery. Her decision to support Emily, despite her mistakes, was a calculated risk that paid off. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Rebecca remarked during a board meeting. "What matters is what they do with it." Rebecca's firm but fair approach became a benchmark for how companies could handle internal crises with grace and resolve. Horizon Analytics' Integrity Initiative quickly became a model for corporate ethics. Other organizations began adopting similar programs, inspired by Horizon's ability to turn a scandal into an opportunity for growth. Emily's name became synonymous with redemption and transformation. Articles and interviews highlighted her journey, framing it as a testament to the power of accountability and resilience. One evening, Emily sat on the balcony of her modest but cozy apartment, a cup of tea warming her hands. She watched the city lights twinkle below, a quiet sense of peace settling over her. Her journey had been tumultuous, marked by mistakes and betrayals, but it had also brought her clarity and strength. She had rebuilt her life from the ground up, transforming her failures into lessons and her regrets into a mission. As she sipped her tea, her phone buzzed with a new message from Rebecca. "The Integrity Initiative just won an industry award. Congratulations, Emily. This is as much yours as anyone's." Emily smiled softly, typing a quick reply. "Thank you, Rebecca. We did this together." She set the phone down and looked out at the city once more. She knew her story wasn't over, but for the first time in years, she felt ready for whatever came next. The Integrity Initiative's success had far-reaching effects, not just for Horizon Analytics but for the broader corporate world. Emily Carter's story became a powerful example of how a single individual's fall and redemption could spark meaningful change. Emily's work expanded beyond corporate consulting. She partnered with nonprofits and universities, developing programs to teach young professionals about ethics in the workplace. She became a sought-after speaker at leadership seminars, where her raw honesty and practical insights left a lasting impact on audiences. During one of her talks, she reflected, "Ethics isn't just about following rules. It's about understanding how your choices affect others and having the courage to do what's right." Even when it's hard, her words resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to prioritize integrity over ambition. At Horizon Analytics, Marcus Reed's leadership within the Integrity Initiative was formally recognized with a promotion to Vice President of Compliance. His sharp intellect and unyielding dedication to fairness made him the ideal candidate to continue driving the company's cultural transformation. In his acceptance speech, Marcus credited Emily for her role in shaping the initiative. "She showed us that admitting to mistakes isn't a weakness, it's a strength. Without her courage, this company wouldn't be where it is today." Rebecca Warren retired shortly after the initiative's first anniversary, leaving behind a legacy of integrity and resilience. Before stepping down, she invited Emily and Marcus to her office for a private meeting. "You two have proven that even in the face of great challenges, it's possible to rebuild trust and make a difference," she said, her sharp gray eyes filled with pride. "I hope you'll carry that forward." Emily and Marcus promised to honor her legacy, their respect for Rebecca evident in their expressions. Emily's story became a case study in business schools and ethics courses worldwide. Professors framed it as a cautionary tale and a roadmap for recovery, showing that even the gravest mistakes could lead to profound growth when addressed with humility and determination. Her journey emphasized universal truths. Mistakes are inevitable. Everyone makes errors, but what defines a person is how they confront and learn from them. Accountability builds trust. Admitting to wrongdoing and taking steps to make amends strengthens personal and professional relationships. Resilience leads to transformation. Adversity can be a catalyst for growth when faced with honesty and courage. One crisp autumn evening, Emily returned to Horizon Analytics as a guest speaker for their annual Integrity Summit. Standing before an audience of employees, board members, and industry leaders, she shared her story with a mix of vulnerability and confidence. "I've learned that integrity isn't about being perfect," she said. "It's about striving to be better every day and recognizing that our choices define not only who we are, but also the world we create around us." The room erupted into applause as Emily stepped down from the stage, her hazel eyes glistening with quiet pride. As she walked out of the building, Marcus joined her, a warm smile on his face. "You've come a long way," he said. Emily smiled back. "We both have." They strolled down the bustling city street, the weight of their shared journey lifting with each step. Though the challenges they faced had been immense, they had emerged stronger, more determined, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. As the final chapter of Emily Carter's journey unfolded, her story left an indelible mark on those who heard it. From boardrooms to lecture halls, her tale of fall and redemption resonated with people striving to navigate the complexities of ambition, ethics, and accountability. The Integrity Initiative at Horizon Analytics thrived, becoming a symbol of hope and transformation in the corporate world. Companies worldwide adopted similar programs, inspired by Horizon's commitment to transparency and ethical leadership. Emily's name became synonymous with resilience and growth. Her actions, once a source of shame, were now a testament to the power of redemption. "It's never too late to change," she often told audiences. "What matters most is the courage to start again." Emily's story offered lessons that transcended the corporate sphere. Redemption is possible. Mistakes are not the end, but an opportunity to grow, rebuild, and inspire others. Courage leads to change. It takes bravery to face the truth, but doing so can spark profound transformation. Integrity matters. In a world often driven by shortcuts, staying true to one's values creates lasting trust and respect. Her journey reminded people that the road to redemption was never easy, but it was always worth it. One quiet evening, Emily sat at her desk, penning an article titled, "The Strength in Owning Your Story." The city lights twinkled outside her window as she wrote. Life isn't defined by the mistakes we make, but by how we rise after we fall. My journey wasn't perfect, but it led me to a place of purpose and clarity I never thought possible. I hope my story inspires others to believe in the power of second chances. As she finished the final sentence, a sense of peace washed over her. Emily placed the article in an envelope, addressed to a young professional who had recently reached out for advice. As she walked to the mailbox, she paused to admire the crisp evening air, a small smile playing on her lips. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. New workshop next month. Ready to inspire another roomful of future leaders. She replied with a single word. Always. As Emily turned to walk home, the glow of streetlights illuminated her path. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, the possibility of a brighter future always remained.